Spoiler alert, by the way.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Action Bros Gaming. I really enjoyed talking about Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It was a video that I released not too long ago, and I really enjoyed it because I like to talk about philosophical ideas and the meanings behind things and kind of diving into metaphors and stuff like that. I really like to talk about that kind of stuff, and I think about it all the time. I really enjoy diving into the meanings of songs and shows and things like that. And so, instead of doing a song this time around, I wanted to do something that was on my mind more recently. So I finished rewatching the show Avatar, The Last Airbender, with a couple of friends of mine because they had never seen the show. What really struck me was the last scene with the final fight between Avatar Aang versus Firelord Ozai. Now, if you don't know the show, I'm going to give you a brief overview right now. So if you already know the show, skip ahead and then we'll talk about that too. In the show, Avatar: The Last Airbender, people can bend the elements. So you have the four elements: water, earth, fire, air. And each of those elements has a nation custom to it. So you have the Fire Nation, you have the Water Tribes, the Earth Kingdom, and the Air Nomads. In each one of those nations, the people of those nations, they can bend that specific element. And it's not everybody. Not everybody can bend. But you have this person called the Avatar. There's one person, and they have the ability to bend all four elements. And whenever the Avatar dies, they are reincarnated as the Avatar, but in a different nation going through the cycle. So, for instance, if you have a Avatar that was born into the Water Tribes, when they die, the next one would be born into the Earth Kingdom, and so on and so forth. It goes through the cycle. So the next one would be Fire Nation, and then after that, the next Avatar will be with the Air Temple, so it just goes through the cycle. Now, basically, there's been a war for over 100 years between the Fire Nation and all the other colonies, all the other bending nations. And our protagonist is Avatar Aang. He's a 13-year-old boy, and he's trying to stop the Fire Lord from basically desecrating the planet. And so I really want to dive into this final fight between Aang and Ozai and talk about the mythological ideas in the show. So before I get in, I was really trying to figure out how to talk about this show. I tried to talk about this video. I tried to make this video earlier, about a week ago, but it was just too much to really dive into, too much for me to mentally comprehend. And so I watched, I think, 3 videos of Jordan Peterson's biblical series to try and refresh in my brain on a lot of these ideas so I could dive back into it. And so, for one thing, just starting off with the fight, you know that Aang is what is called the hero myth. The hero myth is like your knight in shining armor. He's the guy that confronts the dragon in, the old Disney movies. He's the Prince Charming. He's the hero. He's the guy that, confronts the evil and slays it. And so Aang is our representation of the hero myth. Funny enough, if you look at Ozai, if you look at him as a character, he's kind of a metaphor for the dragon itself. Because if you look at Ozai, it's like, what are some of his attributes? He flies, breathes fire. He's a predator. He's kind of a symbol of darkness, and even down to his hair. If you look at his hair, it's very similar to dragons in the show. He has the same kind of hairstyle, so he's very obviously meant to be represented as a dragon. His armor, its scales, he has this kind of dragon appearance. So Aang is obviously the hero, and he bends the 4 elements. Well, that means more than just bending elements. It's like, what does that mean? He has to be the master of all 4 elements, right? That's the whole point of the show, is that he has to master all of these elements. And I feel like the meaning behind that is that you have, whenever you're trying to excel at something and master something, you're trying to get to the top of that hierarchy. You have a hierarchy of competence, let's say, and you're trying to get, to the peak of it. So you have to learn until you master it, and you master it at the top of the hierarchy. Well, if you look at the backside of the $1 bill, what is it? It is an eye on top of a pyramid, but it's floating above it. And the idea behind that is, for one thing, it's an eye, so it's about observation. You're supposed to observe. And the master of all hierarchies, for one thing, he observes, and he's able to move across hierarchies because he's above it. He's elevated himself to the top and above. So the idea is that if you master one hierarchy, you're competent enough to be able to go across other hierarchies and master them as well. It's kind of like success. Success is exponential. If you start to fail, you start to fail exponentially. And if you start to succeed, you start to succeed exponentially. So in my mind, it's kind of like that. And so Aang is the embodiment of that He's observed, he's mastered not just the hierarchy of airbending, but he's mastered all the hierarchies, all of the bending elements. And so he's able to move across all of those platforms. When the fight begins, and Ozai's got a lot of dragon metaphor built up into his look. I mean, he's literally a dragon of chaos. He's destroying the planet with fire, just like a dragon. And there's also a look on Aang's face before he begins to fight. Now, if we know, and his expression is a lot more serious and stoic than he was from the beginning of the show. I mean, if you look at, Mufasa versus Simba, the difference in their faces is that Mufasa definitely looks more veteran. He could be a nice person, but he knows how to make that switch and to switch to the, not necessarily the darker side of his mind, but he knows how to be aggressive, right? And Simba has not yet learned that. He doesn't know how to be aggressive yet. He has to learn that. And if you look at Aang from the beginning of the show, what is he? He looks very boyish. He looks much like a kid. But right before this fight, you see his facial expressions change. He's now more stoic. He's more serious. He's basically making that switch to go and confront Ozai. He has to become something different. He has to become something more than just a kid. He has to grow up, essentially. And in the dialogue that they talk with each other, you can see that it's really painting a picture of one side is evil, one side is good.
Please listen to me. We don't have to fight. You have the power to end it here and stop what you're doing.
You are right. I do have the power. I have all the power in the world!
And so Ozai does this thing. He says, I have all the power in the world. And he does this roar, and he shoots fire from his mouth and his hands. And it's this great display of his bending ability. And a lot of that, I feel like it's a not necessarily a metaphor. It's a literal representation of things that animals do in the wild when they confront their antagonist, when they confront their enemy. They'll puff up, they'll show their stuff, to seem big and aggressive and scary. And sometimes just doing that alone will win them a fight. Basically builds himself up. He's already fairly, masculine. He's swole as all hell, and then he just breathes this huge big thing of fire to assert his dominance, He's like, and I think it's a very powerful representation, and it makes you just go, oh crap, Aang's in trouble here. He's just a small 13-year-old. What is he going to do against this guy? And the cool thing about it is that you notice that in the landscape, Aang is using all 4 elements to confront chaos, to confront this dragon, which is Ozai. And I really like that because it's using all of the knowledge that he's gained thus far to combat the ultimate evil. And so you have to take all the knowledge and all the things that you have within you to fight the greatest evils in your life. It's a great way to show off his mastery of all the elements. And it's a beautiful spectacle. So it basically has it has a ton of layers. It's showing, his competence, how he's changed throughout the series. And it's wonderful to watch. So it's not just spectacle. It's actually got meaning behind it. And it's got layers. And it's really cool to see how his arc is starting to complete itself. As the fight continues, Ozai then starts to attack him with lightning, which is a very, very powerful firebending move. And Aang then redirects it, which is actually, he learned this by a waterbending technique that his mentor taught him, which is really crazy. That's something that I think is super cool about this show, is that each element has its own fighting style to go with it. You can actually learn different elemental techniques from the other fighting styles. Like in this instance, he's being attacked by a firebending move, but he's redirecting it with a water bending technique. And I think that's super cool to show that how his mastery of these multiple elements allows him to play with them and to use what it's something that we do in life, is that you take things that you've learned from completely different situations and you can apply them in everyday issues. I think it's such a cool idea. It's the idea that you can use all of the things that you learn that have nothing to do with what you're doing. You're able to combine them and make them useful in this specific situation. I think it's awesome, and it's a great representation of it. And the coolest thing is that after that, when he's redirecting it, he has a choice. He has to stop Ozai from destroying the world, right? He has a chance where he can right then and there kill Ozai, because Ozai doesn't know how to redirect lightning. But he chooses to not kill him. He shoots the lightning in a different direction. I think that's a great idea because it solidifies his beliefs as a character. And because he truly believes that he does not want to kill Ozai. He wants to stop him, but he doesn't want to kill him. He doesn't believe he should kill anyone. And I feel like the idea behind that is he's not settling. He's going to continue to suffer so he can achieve something higher. He can achieve a higher aim, his highest aim. And obviously he suffers because of that. He gets his ass handed to him. And then after he starts getting the crap kicked out of him, he falls. But he falls into an abyss because he cannot stop him with his ability on his own right now. So he doesn't know how to fight him. And it's funny because he literally falls into water. You know, because that's normally how we represent an abyss is obviously in water. I thought it was really cool that when he fell, he didn't fall on the ground. He didn't fall into shrubbery. He fell into water specifically. And then he flees. He doesn't know how to handle this ultimate evil. He can't do it on his own. And so he hides and he covers himself up in this rock ball, and Ozai just starts kicking his ass completely. Starts just blasting it, and that's the whole thing. It's just like life, you know. You can hide, but as Ozai says,
You can't hide in there forever!
Eventually you have to come out. So Aang is basically in hell at this moment. He's getting hit from every angle, is ultimately blasted. And Ozai does a thing that nobody can do. He fire bends without even doing a martial art move, which kind of breaks the laws of the elemental abilities. You have to move somehow to move the elements, to bend them. But he just conjures up fire from nothing, which just goes to show how powerful he is, that he can break the laws of the magic system in the show. And it is kind of like life too, like things that you never think would happen. You know, things that I wouldn't say that they break reality, but you know, life gives you these curveballs that you just sometimes cannot expect. You cannot expect it. And just like with Ozai, it's the blast that actually breaks through his wall too. It's the blast that breaks through his rock covering. So he can't hide from that. He has to confront him finally. And so at this point, we could say that Aang is in his darkest moment. He is in the epitome of hell on earth. You know, what do you do when you're in that kind of situation? What do you do when you're in the darkness like that? And there's a call in here that's just like the Pinocchio metaphor. Pinocchio travels in the abyss to save his father, right? He travels into the whale, the dark monster, right? When you're in your darkest moment, you have to call upon the strongest part of your being. And that is always represented as the father. For instance, when Simba is at his lowest point, his father comes out of the sky. When Pinocchio travels down into the whale, he sees his father. So whenever you're in the darkest place, you have to call upon the strongest part of your being, and that is represented as the father. And in this show, Aang unlocks the Avatar state. And the Avatar state is basically all of his past lives. He suddenly gains their knowledge, and he gets put into this point where he has all of the knowledge of the past avatars and all of their abilities. And so essentially, he does exactly what Pinocchio does, exactly what Simba does. He calls the father. He finds the father. And then after that point, the entire dynamic of the fight changes. Everything changes, and it's so cool, and I love it, because you think Aang is mad at Ozai. You think he's the one that's wanting to put a stop to this. What about all of the avatars before him who had to fight in this war, who lost in this war? It's such a cool idea, because when Aang comes out of the rock, it is no longer Aang. The Avatar state is taking control over Aang without his will, and it is scary. Aang looks completely different. He looks like he's about to murder somebody, and kind of is. It's a complete change in power dynamic, and Aang suddenly gains this new power to the point where he's almost breaking the laws of physics. I remember somebody was talking about how in the scene when Aang brings the water to him, he's condensing water, which is not physically possible. Okay? He condenses the rock, he condenses the water. Everything is condensed around him, which is not physically possible. So Ozai was able to, break the rules of the elements. Aang is breaking physics. Okay? That is ungodly power. Aang is basically a god right now. And it shows, because Ozai can't do shit to Aang. And he gets his ass handed to him. And the cool thing is that there's a parallel that I noticed when I was rewatching the fight. Aang gets thrown up against the wall and he unlocks the Avatar state. And then he does the exact same thing to Ozai, and he throws Ozai up against a different wall. And I thought that was a very interesting parallel. Don't necessarily know what it means. So now Aang is the aggressor. Aang is the one that's starting to fight, but it's not really Aang. It's the revenge of the dead father. And what I mean by that is the dead father is a very old idea. Basically, you have an ideal. So you look to those who inspire you to basically live up to this great ideal, right? Well, what if there's a person that is the ideal of all ideals? It's like a combination of them all. It's very old. It goes back to the days of Mesopotamia, if you think about it. Because when Mesopotamia was getting together, they all told stories. And it was stories of their ideal. Like someone who's good at hunting, someone who's strong, someone who's caring and charismatic. And all these were represented as gods. You have the god of rage, the god of love, the god of hunting. You have this in Greek mythology, but you also have it in Mesopotamia. And maybe not all of those, but you get my point. But when they came together, they had to make basically a god of gods. And that ended up being Marduk. And Marduk had eyes all around his head and he could speak magic words, which is a really cool idea, because basically what it means is that and he is what defeats the ultimate chaos, which is Tiamat. She was basically the god of chaos. She was more than a god. She was chaos embodied. And what Marduk could do is it's kind of like, if you want to confront the chaos of the world, you have to be able to watch and see what is going on around you properly and speak order into being. It's such a deep idea. And in relation to this, Aang is now essentially Marduk fighting chaos. He's basically akin to a god. He is at his ultimate point, kind of. Problem is that this Avatar state is trying to murder Ozai. Like, if you watch it, it's trying to murder Ozai. Like, it's pulling no punches. And it's kind of like, Ozai was trying to change the world. He wanted to change the world and build it anew. But when your old idea tries to erase, because he's trying to kill Aang. When your old idea is trying to erase the ideas of old, you don't mess with old ideas. It's like Ozai's new world is insignificant next to the ideas of the old, because the old have been there. They know what it's like. And they work. And so when you're trying to build something new, if you're going to destroy the dead father and not resurrect them, not bring them back, that's what tradition is. Tradition is basically the dead father. It's like the old saying goes, you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish and he'll eat for the rest of his life. You have to teach people how to act properly in the world. And if you don't, then it falls apart. And so I feel like Ozai is rejecting the old traditions and is trying to build his own thing. He believes his ideas are superior to the ideas of old. Kind of like the Tower of Babel, you know, it's like people who are that kind of logical become in love with their own ideas, which is very much Ozai. If you listen to the way he talks, he's very much in love with his own ideas.
Just as the world will be reborn in fire, I shall be reborn as the supreme ruler of the world. From this moment on, I will be known as the Phoenix King.
And if you do that, you find out very quickly that, for one thing, your ideas aren't all that great, and that you don't mess with old traditions. You don't mess with things that have been around for a while, because it comes back to bite you in the ass. I mean, it's like the Tower of Babel in the Bible. They were going to try and build a structure that reached heaven. And what does God do? He just smites it down and makes everybody speak different languages, I think. And so when it comes down to the moment, Aang has got Ozai trapped. And he's about to kill... Well, the Avatar state has Ozai trapped, and they're about to kill him. But Aang suddenly gets control of his body again and refuses to kill Ozai, which is really cool because Aang's got the proper way of progress. He's progressing properly. Ozai's trying to destroy the old to create new. Aang is adopting the old and adding something new. Does that make sense? I think. Because he accepts the Avatar state finally. You know, he's able to get into the Avatar state. But he has new ideas that could improve the world, essentially. And so he's about to go to the edge of chaos. He's about to confront chaos with this new idea to try and see if it works. And so it's almost like, I wrote this bullet point, and I'm trying to figure it out. It says, it's wrestling with the spirit of the Father, kind of like Israel. Israel means to wrestle with God and create a new path of enlightenment. So it's like he's got a new idea, and he's going to try and wrestle with the world to see if it works. He turns his back to Ozai, and Ozai says,
Even with all the power in the world, you are still weak.
And he moves. And it does something. This is a writing thing, but Aang's earthbending master was blind. She could see by using basic echolocation in her feet. And the old writing saying goes, if you have a shotgun put up on the mantle in the first act, if it's not used by the third act, it's meaningless and shouldn't be there. That's what I love so much about this scene, is because we learn that very early on about Toph's ability to see through, her ears, basically see through hearing. And it's used in this final act, in this final fight. And it's such a good callback. It's incredible. And then you see Aang basically just mess Ozai up with putting him in a second trap. He's got him trapped all on his own now. He wasn't even using the Avatar state. And there's a line in here, and it's crazy. It says, before the era of the Avatar, we bend not the elements, but the energy within ourselves. That's a lot, okay? And I feel like it has something to do with action and self-control. Because it's like, if you want to interact with the world, you have to be able to control yourself first. If you want to make the world a better place and be able to bend the elements, essentially, is kind of what they're saying, you have to be able to control yourself within before you can control the world around you. So it's like cleaning your room. If you want to change the world, you got to start small. Got to start with you. And then you can go from there. So, like cleaning your room, something small. Then cleaning your house. Then maintaining your job. Then possibly elevating to a better point, better position in your job. Taking on more and more responsibility. So I feel like that's kind of what they're getting at in that line. Aang does this thing called energy bending. What he's trying to do is he's trying to take Ozai's firebending away And so he has to basically have a stronger spirit than Ozai. And another thing that this lion turtle says, he says,
To bend another's energy, your own spirit must be unbendable, or you will be corrupted and destroyed.
and I feel like what that goes along the lines of, one of the things that it made me think about was how you don't want to help someone who can't help themselves, or who refuses to help themselves, because oftentimes it'll only drag you down with them. Whenever you want to save someone from drowning, you have to push them with your foot. So you stay far back and you push them with your foot, because if you get too close, then they're going to grab onto you and you're both going to drown, right? So I feel like that's kind of what it's talking about, is that in order to help someone else, you have to be stable. You have to be completely stable, because as soon as you give, then everything falls apart. And so Aang almost loses, but his spirit is stronger than Ozai's, and it's an awesome revelation. The music, swells, and it's just a beautiful scene. And Aang stands triumphant, whereas Ozai is laying on the ground and he can't firebend anymore. And it's done beautifully. It's so lovely to hear. And then Aang has control over the Avatar state. Because before, the Avatar state was a defense mechanism, but now he has control of it, and it shows by him accessing the state and it fading away. So now he has complete control over the Avatar state, and he uses his bending to basically save the world. So the world was in fire, and he lifted up the water and does this beautiful display of his bending ability, and it's just so awesome to watch. The whole fight's just incredible. It gets so much in it. And that whole cutting into the Avatar state to bring in the Death Father, that's so much to dive into. It's so much, but it's so cool. The show's definitely worth watching. I think so, especially for the payoff in the end. Spoiler alert, by the way. But yeah, so that's basically it. That's the whole fight, and I spent almost 45 minutes talking about it, because I'm trying to think through it. I'm trying to think about what it means, all the things, because writing wise, it's laid out very well. It's almost its own story, basically, because it's got 3 acts. It's got the introduction, rising action, conflict, and climax. It's got it all. So from a writing standpoint, it's very well, but as a metaphorical standpoint, it gets almost all the archetypes so well. It does them so well, and I think it's great. It's a wonderful piece of film, and I am proud to own it. So I'm glad y'all guys listened to my TED Talk. And thanks for watching. So if y'all guys like this stuff, if you like me talking about philosophical and deep ideas that I don't know enough about, but I think I have a really basic idea of, leave a comment and let me know. So either way, my brain's fried. And so I'm going to go and drink some water and probably do some editing. So I'll see y'all later. Bye. That was difficult to get through.